How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com.
Hey there. This is Jeff Fritz, the purple blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET. In 2002, the guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl's joined up with the folks from Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class at, are you ready? Get this, at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. Carl's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other, your partner with you, and you should, right? This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do, and Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristed region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Listen, space is limited and for very good reason. This is quality training in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2023. That's BLAZOR 2023 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
And Jimmy Bogard is here. We haven't talked to him in a while. It's going to be fun. Fun, I say. But first, Richard, how are you? You all moved out yet?
Just about moved, yeah. Final, of course, we're recording a couple of weeks in advance, so the last things are moving. By the time this show publishes, I think we'll be a week away from handing over the keys and living on the coast full time. So we've done the slow move. Like we've spent weeks at it, just taking truckloads up each week with our pickup. And in some ways, it's been very therapeutic because bit by bit, this house feels less and less ours.
Yeah.
When you take all the stuff off the walls and you're emptying out rooms and stuff, it just sort of becomes a house. Admittedly, it's a house we built back in the day. But, and it looks like it needs a reno now. Like it's been 14 years since we built it. So the cabinet needs to be refinished and the floor should be redone. And I'd replace that carpet and I'd paint those walls. And it's not my problem. Somebody else is going to own it in like 2 more weeks. So that's that.
I had my, PWOP 3.0 Studios grand opening party last Saturday.
Yeah.
It's not really done, but it's pretty close.
Let's be clear. Nothing's ever done.
Nothing's ever done.
It's like building a software app. Building an app. Is it done? What is done?
Well, there is a definition of done, and it's not there yet. Basically, we have the walls are great. The floor is awesome. The trim is done. The air conditioning unit is in, and half of the room has sound absorptive ceiling tiles on them, and they're hung like they're custom made. They're hung.
Nice.
So they're 2 inches. From the top, and that means that sound gets trapped above them as well as below them. but only half the room was done. And it's just because we just didn't finish that. And we had to pick a day.
So, I mean, can you record in it yet? Because you kind of need that stuff.
Well, I could, but I don't want to move everything in there until all of those panels are up, because everything will be in the way, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's very exciting.
We've got the nice wooden floors, and they need to be refinished. But you would never do that and live in it. Like, it's such a mess.
Yeah, yeah.
So the one chance the new owner is going to get to redo the floor is, in this window when we're out before they go in. It's like, you should do this floor now.
Oh, the joys of building and tearing down.
But it's funny, my reflex on this place is no longer so much my place, and it's a place I would renovate and how I would fix it up, like the things that it needs. Because after 14 years since we built it, it just it needs things.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's get things started with Better Know a Framework. Roll the crazy music.
All right, man, what do you got?
As if I didn't need another project.
What are you doing?
I decided to start a new little YouTube and maybe even TikTok show called The Blazer Puzzle.
Okay.
So every week, and Jeff Fritz is going to be doing it with me.
Oh, cool.
Every week we're going to create a little demo, a little Blazer application that you can download. And it's either going to be a puzzle, a coding challenge, or find the bug kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't this work? Can you make the architecture better? Just something very simple, right? And then people email me their answers, and I'll pick one at random from all the correct answers and send them a mug. A what mug, you say? A Blazer puzzle mug. So that they don't really exist yet, but they will.
Right. I'm sure they'll be great.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be great. And the only way you can get them is by answering them correctly. So that's what I'm doing right now. So it will be at blazerpuzzle.com probably by the time you read this. And I hope you have fun with it.
I keep thinking about actually making a Blazer puzzle. Like, what would that app look like where you had a bunch of pieces and you could move them around?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's more like a puzzler. It's more like a gotcha solver kind of thing.
Yeah, figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea of a picture of you and a picture of Fritz and the logo, and then it breaks into puzzle pieces and falls to the bottom of the screen.
You're not far from the actual test video that we've created already to introduce it. It kind of does look like that.
A good guess, huh?
Yeah. Well, it also, it speaks to the fact that I don't have an original idea to save my life. So
I'm not going to go there.
We had to fall in line. What's expected.
You got the domain name. You pretty much dictates what you're going to do.
Pretty much. So anyway, that's it. Who's talking to us today, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1852, which we did just back in June with Sean Walker. We were talking about going full time on open source.
Yeah.
Just the sort of thing Jimmy Bogard would never do.
Never.
But we had some great comments on that show. And I mean, it was really fun to talk to Sean too, because he really came at it from yet another angle as we keep exploring this. What does the open source ecosystem look like today? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to presume this is a pseudonym, because it's QRYS, which to me reads like queries, except for a distinct lack of vowels. Well, that Y doesn't seem like a vowel in that series. So queries says, hey, thanks for the great show. I can confirm that for companies, it's really a hurdle to donate to open source projects, even if they use and appreciate open source tools and libraries, like my small employer, which is only about 20 people. However, we have now decided to handle it this way. Each year, employees can nominate their most valued or appreciated open source project. The one that eventually gets chosen gets a one-time donation of about 1,000 Swiss francs. I just checked. That's like 1,100 USD.
Okay.
I think this could serve as one example of how to overcome the mental hurdle for such payments, because it's only just once a year. They are somewhat justified by the company as an organization, and the company might even advertise this, although we currently don't. Yeah, I don't know how you'd advertise that well, other than that whole wearing your culture on the sleeve. Yeah, we support open source thing. Mm-hmm. But, a 20-person company committing $1,000 a year to an open source project, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, it is legit.
So Queries, thank you so much for your comment. I don't know that's your name. I'm pretty sure it's not. But thanks anyway. And a copy of Music to Go By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Go By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Go By.
And you can follow us on Twitter if you like, but the real fun is happening over on Mastodon. I'm Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot, and we might even read it. Hey, let's bring back Jimmy Bogard, shall we? Jimmy is the creator and maintainer of the popular open source libraries AutoMapper and Mediator. That's Mediatr. Jimmy's an independent software consultant based in Austin, Texas. He's received the MVP award every year since 2009, and he joins us again today. Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
Doing okay. Like telling you earlier, just trying to survive in this horrible heat we've been having here in Austin, Texas. It's miserable. Like can't walk the dog, can't do anything. It's just suffocating.
It's just dangerously hot, right? Like it's not even funny. It's just
they're just like, don't go outside between like 3 and 6. Just don't.
Yeah,
right.
You start to understand why desert cultures have a siesta. Right. Where it's like because what else are you going to do? You mentioned trying to live without AC in those conditions.
Oh man. Yeah. Get a fan and a block of ice.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, the last time we talked to you on the show was 2019. It was
hardly too long ago.
June 2019.
I was saying to Carl as I got on today, it's like, we don't talk to Jimmy often enough. I'm kind of
that was the before times.
It was, yeah.
When we went to offices and all that stuff, yeah.
Well, anyway, we were talking to you about messaging architecture, and I can't remember if we talked about Mediator. You're probably working on it at that time, but it wasn't the complete focus of it. But why don't you start us off with the Mediator pattern? What is it, and why do we need it?
Sure. So I think just as a context of where this kind of came from, it was a kind of an evolution of us building larger systems and having to dealing with like the complexities of just the kind of business logic and code we're having to manage. And so the gist of the Mediator pattern is that if you've got some like UI code or something that is needing to interact with some services, instead of you trying to talk to those services directly, you go through sort of a middleman, and that middleman is that mediator. And so instead of you like depending directly on those services that are doing the work for you, you kind of package up what you want into a request object. You send it to the mediator. It dispatches to the handling logic and then finally returns you that response.
So it's a little bit different, but kind of solves the same problem as MVVM, right? A view model kind of does that, but it doesn't have as explicit an architecture, right? Is that what you think?
Yeah, exactly. Some of these they do kind of complement and go with each other. I mean, essentially MVVM, those things you're talking to are also stateful, and they're, you're receiving events and communicating from the UI. When we're using this mediator pattern, we're usually in the kind of more of a stateless land. It's like a web, like MVC sort of place where the UI or the browser is already sending this request and receiving a response back. And so this pattern was trying to take it sort of one level below that and kind of get rid of all the UI cruft and response codes and just say, well, what is like just the sort of pure data in, data out that we're dealing with on all the different requests in our system.
But it solves the same kind of problem, which is tight coupling.
Yeah. I mean, we're always trying to find kind of the holy grail of the pattern that will solve all the complexity issues in our code base. And
yeah.
I mean, nothing ever solves it completely, but that's what we're looking at. Like we were using MVC, and this is like early days of ASP.NET MVC Classic. I don't know what you call like the last one. And we just saw like our controllers were getting big. Yeah. And we're like, well, what do we do now? Where do we put this junk that's piling up here? And so a lot of those kinds of concepts and ideas emerge from just dealing with these big controller classes. Like, what do we do? How do we deal with this sort of stuff?
Yeah. What I usually do is make some sort of manager that I can inject into the controller. So the controller merely passes on and returns data, and those managers, I guess in the mediator pattern, those would just be objects that you send messages to and get messages back from. How does that work with a controller?
Yeah. So we started that exact path as well, where we had these, every controller, like, I don't know, invoice controller had the invoice manager that had the business logic and all all the MVC controllery stuff, action results and HTTP context and those webby sort of things, those are on the controller. But once you cut into like the pure business logic, I'm passing data to something and then it does the work and it gives me some data out. We started that as these manager classes. Now suddenly those manager classes started to get big as well. Right? And then each of the methods on the manager classes was directly tied to a single action or kind of HTTP endpoint on the front end.
Right. So you're not really gaining any decoupling. You're just moving it into another class.
We moved it into a different class. And we also noticed that this was in the days of subversion. So like merge conflicts were a thing that we had to worry about. So we are also having this issue that if we had new features coming on to a set of screens, then multiple developers were working in these manager classes and having just merge conflicts. Sure. And we went back to the original sort of solid design, and there's the I in solid was the interface segregation principle. And the general idea there is that if you have an interface with multiple methods and they don't really have much to do with each other, they're never called together on the same sort of requests, we found that each of those manager methods was only ever called with one of the controller actions.
Right.
So we thought, well, even though these all have to deal with like invoices, the logic inside of there really don't have anything to do with each other. They're just all glommed together in a single file. So our first step was just to remove each of those manager methods and stick it in its own class so that it just was living by itself. And then if I needed to change the one action, I had one place to go to for the business logic of that one action that was separated from the UI, but also separated from the logic of other requests.
But you were also talking about the merge conflict part of this, but that separation, and then because it was separate file, I'm trying to think about it. Did Subversion make a difference there? Like, is GitHub somehow better at merge conflicts?
Git is better because you are able to do a three-way merge. You have what you both started with and then like where you both ended.
Right.
And Subversion, you don't really have that. You only have like just constant headaches. So part of that was just a reaction to that.
Because it kind of hurts you in your heart when it's like, I changed the way I do my code because of my tooling. Right.
There are other issues as well. Like, those are the old days of the horrible CS proj merge conflicts as well. So just like merge conflicts, like part of our thing was like, how do we separate the workouts of people working on features so they're not stepping on each other's toes?
Right. And
so we started that thing of just like, well, just split the manager into multiple methods. And then each method is in its own file and class. And if I have to change the business logic for that one page, I'm not affecting anybody else.
No, nobody else needs to know. Yep. All as well. I'm also reminded, and I'm sure I've said this many times, is that every app has ugliness in it. It's just a question of, do you know where yours is? You're going to have to put some ugly somewhere. So how do you wrap it in a relatively tidy package that people can deal with as opposed to spraying it all over the whole app?
In this case, you traded off these giant manager classes for lots of little objects.
Exactly.
That now you have to manage. You have to manage something.
Yeah.
Because the logic has to be there.
And that we thought the idea of like having these managers as well was like, well, we can now share logic between these different things. But that was a, double-edged sword. One side of the sword is actually much sharper than the other.
Yeah.
It cut us much worse because we found that if we changed this logic that was shared amongst multiple things, like suddenly I could have these unintended side effects.
Right.
So when we're adding new features to the system, we're like, okay, I got to spend much more time figuring out I got to make sure I'm not breaking anything before I'm able to just write code. So that was kind of another side effect where you're like, well, don't make the first thing you're doing sharing code, make that be the exceptional case where, it's after the third time you've copied and pasted that logic, like, okay, maybe this is something we should share, but not share by.
Don't do it up front.
Yeah. So the mediator pattern came into play, like after us making these like single files, we took a step back, like these all look very similar, but they're also different and their own, like not like they're all different for no reason whatsoever. So we were looking around at the time. This is also the time that Greg Young was coming up with this whole like CQRS concept of like separating out read and write objects. And so we looked at these classes like, well, this is doing that. It's separating out like every request from each other. So the logic is separated out. And so we settled on this. We flipped through the old Gang of Four book. Like there's gotta be a solution for this. Right. And one of the few times that I've looked in that book and actually found something useful was like, oh, instead of me having these like everything is a one-off whatever, I can have something mediate sending this request down. And so instead of me depending directly on all these individual manager classes, instead I depend on this one mediator class, and I send a request for something, I request for data, a request to do some work, and then I get a single response back. And those individual manager classes got refactored into individual request handlers from that mediator itself. Okay. So it's just a very natural kind of refactoring progression for us to arrive at this pattern at the end.
And you're saying that you send a message and get a response, but it's not asynchronous, is it? Because you're in the web context here.
Yeah, I even hesitate to call it a message because it doesn't have the traditional characters. There's no header, there's no package or payload or whatever. So it's really, we called it a request object. So it's like a request DTO, if you will.
Yeah.
And I get back a response, another DTO or data transfer objects. Mm-hmm. We want to make this very clear. Like I'm sending kind of pure data in and I'm getting pure data out.
Synchronously.
And exactly. It's all synchronous. It's all in process. Mm-hmm. What we're all just trying to do is like give us one level of separation between the thing doing the work and like the pure kind of request and response objects in and out as being this very pure data objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're also abstracting the transport off of that too. So if you did want to do a messaging infrastructure or async systems and stuff, I don't think it would be that big of a deal to support that.
No, but okay. So there are, I wouldn't say competitors, but some folks have done like alternate implementations of this pattern. Mm-hmm. And it becomes more formally, realized there's another version of this kind of thing called a command dispatcher. And I won't go too far into it, but it's like a whole thing of like, well, if you're in the business of like doing this whole, I don't care if it's async or not. It could be durable or non-durable messaging. You kind of go off on that land. But I, on the heels of my other open source project, AutoMapper, which I was, I strive to make this library have as few features as possible.
Interesting.
Because I realized like every new feature I added, I'd have to support for years.
Yeah,
right? I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, just make this as dumb
What's the
as
future
possible.
Pain factor? FPF of this.
Yeah. Like I really swung the pendulum and like learned my lesson there. So this was like, I wouldn't do that. There's a couple reasons. One is if you look at it from a like user experience perspective, there's a stark contrast in the expected responses of an asynchronous message versus a synchronous one. Mm. If I'm on a screen and I click the button and it comes back the response saying, yes, you have submitted the form and I've received it. Now you can see the results of that on your screen. If it's asynchronous and it sends a message to a queue, there's no guarantee of when that work can be done. Right. So the logical response you get back is like, we got your message. It'll be done sometime in the future. We don't know when, but like, thank you for your request versus
don't call us, we'll call you.
Exactly. So like that, the invoice example, I click approve invoice. I go back to the list of invoices and it shows approved. If I submit a request to approve the invoice, it'll just say, we have received your request, but that invoice is not approved yet. Mm-hmm. It's approved sometime in the future. So I don't try to swap those two up because it has a drastic, impact to the user experience.
Yeah.
You could though. You just like, whenever you see folks using this pattern and they're like, oh yeah, now I can swap in, Azure Service Bus. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, that's going to have a huge impact on the UX because now they don't see the results of their action. So just be careful that you don't try to do that sort of thing.
Right.
So what does the Mediator library have in it that gives me more than I can, do just creating my own objects and interfaces to abstract these things away?
Saving that 30 minutes of time, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, even when I created the library myself, I didn't want to, again, I was coming off of like AutoMapper annoyance and people want all this stuff and now they're asking me for these features and I don't know what to, I'll say yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And so this like, I didn't want to create this library to begin with. And I copied and pasted that code to like the fourth project in our consulting company. And finally my boss was like, Jimmy, just like create a library for this. Like this is just create a NuGet package so we don't have to copy and paste this code. And if we do like have any changes or features, whatever, then like everyone benefits in our company, not just like the next one that gets copied and pasted. So that was kind of like, if you copy and paste code from the third client, then maybe you should make a NuGet package for that. Right. So that's effectively what happened.
It becomes NuGet qualified.
Yeah. So that they kind of like, it started out as very simple and dumb, like 100 lines of code that could be done anywhere. And really most of it was just like, you were using dependency injection containers. So how do you make sure if I send a request thing down that it gets dispatched to the right object? Well, we're using dependency injection to find the right thing to dispatch to. That's annoying code to write to like hook those things up. So that got wrapped up into the package as well. So it just started out like that. It was just pure, here's the code I've been copying and pasting over and over again. But since then, it kind of graduated to like, okay, how are people using this? How can we gather those lessons learned and then apply those lessons into this library?
Well, you've got tens of thousands of people using this. It says 140 million downloads. Like,
I didn't know. I didn't know it was that many.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the GitHub, dude. It's like, 54,000.
Yeah.
Like that. These are big numbers.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are, my Azure function bots, pumping those numbers in the background, but I'm sure a few of those are.
Are you running 100 million Azure bots? I just wanted to know because that'd be cool. Be very cool.
Oh, no, I don't think the MVP perks will cover that many.
Yeah, I think that might blow your budget a little bit, just a little.
Just looking through the code, I mean, yeah, there's some really, really cool stuff here. And I love the fact that you're using generics and even out types out of T.
Oh, I don't remember the difference. Like it is using the variances.
Yeah.
Co and contra.
But it looks pretty, I mean, yeah, there's some stuff in here, but it does look very simple. And that's what makes it good, I guess, huh?
That was the idea, is because again, we're trying to distill down like what is kind of the essence of our systems. And it's like you send a request in and you get a response out. Like that's, I'm dealing with web apps most of the time, right? It's all HTTP request response. But we're like, well, how can we take that kind of one level below that, which is get rid of the status codes and, streams and junk like that. And then it becomes a pure, like I send a data request in and I expect to get a data response out. And that made it also really easy for us to test our systems. So we shifted our testing. We used to have these unit tests that were all unit testing our controllers, then like mocking those managers out or manager dependencies. And it was really hard to understand what was going on with their system. So from there, with this mediator pattern, we had all of our tests go through this like request in response out, which made our tests now very kind of simple to understand. I push data in. What does the data get out? And what happens behind the scenes?
Not your problem.
Not my problem, Mike. If it's calls a sort of procedure or what, I don't know.
And both sides are testable that way, right? You could have a simple invocation to test the back end part of that too.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So we had this big shift from, the whole testing pyramid with like the bottom is all your unit tests.
Right.
And then you have like an order of magnitude fewer integration tests. We wound up kind of flipping that, where we started out with all of our stuff being integration tests, because that was like the way I absolutely knew the system worked would be to send the data request in and validate the data request out. And if that looked good, I don't like that's, and then, okay, if there's like, more granular logic I want to unit test, we can do that. But then like our confidence in our system just doubled, because we knew like from this very, pure request response level, it was all working the way we expected to.
It's almost assertion like. It's like, I send you this, you give me that. I send you this, you give me that. If you can do all of these things, green light.
Exactly.
All right.
So it just helped simplify, just the window into the actual logic in our system became very uniform and very focused on each individual request from each other.
All right. So I see that you have notifications in here, which raised my eyebrows a little bit. So notifications typically are asynchronous to me. And then I look in the code and you have a wrapper class for a synchronous notification handler. What on earth is that?
So one of our guiding principles when we're trying to build these kind of systems is like, okay, for the request and response to your system, it was always one-to-one with the kind of user interface. So one request in, one response out. And those were designed specifically for each individual kind of web endpoint in my system. I didn't share those requests, didn't share the responses typically, but they were always like one-to-one. I send one request in, it goes to a handler through the mediator, and I get a response out that is tied to that.
Okay.
But there were still some times that I did want like sort of one-to-n. So if I have a kind of request going out, it may be going to multiple different handlers to be able to do something with. And then one kind of good example we had is if I have a set of business logic in my application, if I'm doing like DDD, then that's in my quote domain layer. But if I want to affect change in some other part of my system or some other system altogether, I don't want to necessarily put that logic right there because that's kind of imperative. Go poke this other thing over there to do the work. Instead, I would like to say, well, this thing happened. I want to notify other folks that this thing has happened. And then however they like to deal with it is completely up to them. So it's still a synchronous sort of handling. That is, I'm invoking those notification handlers synchronously. It is async in the C# sense, but it is synchronous from I am awaiting the response of that handler.
Okay.
But then what we're doing in those notification handlers is then like, well, what am I affecting change in another system, like calling another web API? Am I then actually taking that notification and dropping it on a bus, Azure Service Bus, to then notify like actual external systems? I could do whatever I want to, like, instead of me having to directly invoke those systems from my business logic, I can raise a notification and have that then translated or done whatever I want to the outside world.
So it's almost just like another word for request and response, but it indicates that we're calling another object that might be in an entirely different domain or a different stack.
Exactly. So it could be, I kind of think it's like the regular sending a request is a, one-to-one. This is a one-to-many.
One-to-many. But
I really wouldn't call it pub sub because you're not subscribing to things.
Right.
I mean, literally all it's doing is like going to the container and asking for all the different notification handlers of this notification and then calling all of them. Like it's a very stupid thing underneath the covers, but it gives you that decoupling of the handling of what to do with that versus imperative, like go flip this other bit.
Yeah.
I'm saying, well, my bit was flipped. Whoever wants to do something else with that is completely up to them.
Very cool. Thanks for clarifying.
And gentlemen, I'm going to interrupt for one moment for this very important message. And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey.
Talking to our friend Jimmy Bogard about Mediatr. I just noticed, like, Mediator's in your GitHub repository, J. Bogard, but AutoMapper's not?
Yeah. I don't know.
Why don't you know, Jimmy?
Oh, I mean, like, AutoMapper was in my GitHub, and then we like, okay, there's multiple other kind of libraries related to it. It was easier to put those under an umbrella of an organization versus my personal one. Whereas Mediatr, like, there's just that, and I don't want anything else. It's like, I even recently collapsed down. There was an extension for the Microsoft dependency injection container.
Right.
And I noticed that the downloads of that were almost identical to the downloads of the main library. So I'm like, okay.
They're always taking it. Why have a separate repository?
Yeah. So yeah, I even collapsed it. There were two, and now there's one. It's like the Highlander sort of rule. Now there's one.
Yeah, where I see in AutoMapper, you have stuff for Unity Framework, stuff for OData, and like it becomes a nuisance. So rather than have them all listed, mixed in with everything else and getting issues because they can't find stuff.
Right.
But, this is good. This is like a lesson in how to evolve things that become too complex. That's just
That's
great.
my goal here. I'm like, I don't want any more headaches, open source headaches, then just kind of a forcing function that I can't make it more complicated.
Yeah.
It is an interesting point that this opinionated approach to software comes from experience. That the more stuff you build, the more you realize, I kind of really want to make this thing just do this thing. And if you need to do something else, you should use something else.
I was another huge, that's from the design of this library, Mediator. I copied and pasted the code several times. Like AutoMapper did come out of a project, but after it was done in that project, I added so many features that I never used personally. Right. Which is super fun when someone comes with a bug and I'm like, oh, actually I have no idea how this is supposed to be used. I just kind of like, chin scratch speculation. This might be cool for somebody. And then the bug comes in and I'm like, well, I don't know if this is correct behavior or not. So Mediatr is like purely now born out of, I don't add features unless I have some immediate needs on clients or projects, whatever. And then, if there's something that I think I may need, then like, I really have to make sure that I'm not.
Well, I think the main thing is somebody going to use it well, depend on it in a meaningful way and I would think, and exercise it enough that you know that it works correctly.
Right. I have to be super careful too of changing the design of anything in there.
Sure.
Like AutoMapper, I really didn't care too much about breaking the API from time to time because I just
by devs for devs, they'll figure it out. You're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not production code.
Mediator is like I live through the pain of me breaking my own API. It's like
you beat yourself up.
It's like I'm gonna be super careful about those sort of things. But I mean, it does happen from time to time. Like, oh gosh, one of the bad ones recently was I had a cancellation token support, which I should have had from the beginning. But like adding an extra parameter to an interface where you have like 100 implementations in a project, like I need to get really good at regex to like make this simple on myself.
Yeah, no kidding. But well, this is always that thing of realize, I missed this feature. Should have been in there in the beginning. When do we commit the pain? Now or later? I
mean, you were just talking about generics. I did a change where I added generic constraints because I thought it was not because we needed it, because I thought it would make the code more correct. But instead just like pissed everybody off because it didn't add anything. And it just broke stuff. Like it just silently broke stuff. Like if you add the constraints, it's like suddenly it'll compile. This is my mistake. Like it still compiled, but just didn't work. And nobody knew why. It's like, well, oops, don't do that again either.
Yeah. And that's just the classic architecture problem, right? If like, do I need this now? Well, I'm probably not going to need it later.
Exactly.
Like it's really hard to anticipate. At the same time, it's like, and you always regret it when it's like, oh, I do need this. And I didn't do it back then. And now it's going to be harder to implement.
Yeah.
One of the fun things about this project though has been, just like seeing how the crazy ways people try to use this thing. And like half my issues are like, just don't do that. Like you're well past the boundaries of what I would consider like appropriate use of this library. And like, if it's painful, then like maybe don't do that. Just,
right.
Like you're abusing it. I should
just don't.
Hurts when I do this.
Don't do it. I love it. It is so much fun. Do you actually work much on AutoMapper these days?
So like, my open source work is almost like it's 95% determined on what my clients are needing at the time. Right. So I'm not a hobbyist OSS developer. I mean, I spend time like doing updates and like issues, but I can only code for what's in front of me. And if the people in front of me don't need something done, then like I just won't spend my time doing something speculatively because I've had so much. Yeah.
I mean, do you do any recreational coding these days? Really? Are you just working?
I mean, this coding examples for like conference talks count as recreational.
Yeah, I guess that's as close as you get. In the end, we don't make a living from conference talks. They have some benefits.
Right. No, I mean, I don't, not especially. It's just, I've got, children now. So like
your hands are plenty full, friend. I get that. And it is interesting to see how we cycle in our lives between these different things.
Yeah.
Part of selling this house is I did a whole lot of Home Assistant in this house, and I have been writing a manual for the new owner to live with Home Assistant and just.
Are you not just going to take all that equipment with you? You're like, these are my switches.
I would break the house, like I really.
Oh, sure.
And they actually, the realtor sold the house on the back of some of these automations. The whole just walking in the room and say, play jazz, and it played jazz. Like they like that stuff. How do you leave it behind? By the way, and this has totally got nothing to do with anything, but so I've now made the list of all of the different accounts I have to migrate. And it's a dozen. There's only one that has a formal transfer ownership concept, where you can actually say, hey, I'm selling this equipment to someone configured as it is. It's Sonos.
Oh.
The audio guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a bunch of Sonos integrated in the house. Works really well. No reason to move it. Why would you break that? And they actually have an infrastructure, a setup where it's like, give me the new account. They agree. Stuff leaves your account, but you keep the config. I got a lot of stuff tuned up perfectly for the house. You don't want to lose any of those configurations. None of the others have that. Some of the others you can add a new account to it and then move stuff over to it, but not really a migration. And I'll just delete myself out of it. Some of them are like, nope, start over.
Yeah.
That's just painful. Not your problem. Sorry, total digression. Stuff that's on my mind right now.
Yeah, that's okay. So we're not going to see you in Copenhagen, I see.
No, I got accepted to the St. Louis DevUp Conf, so
that's
over there.
That's a great show.
Yep,
I've done that
show. Might see the Cardinals. Who knows? It's a fun town.
Yeah, without a doubt. Do you do talks on Mediator? I didn't even check.
They're always tied into the problems I was trying to solve, because I've done no talks on AutoMapper or Mediator. It's always in service of like, we came up with this tool to help solve this problem. And the problem we were having was that when I talked about earlier, like these controllers are too big. We need to split things out. And so when I talk about like architectural concepts that helps solve, it's really like, oh, and if you want to make this easier on yourself, that you don't have to like figure out all the weird containery junk.
Yep.
There's this thing here that will just like kind of skip past that part.
Makes that piece easier, which I mean makes a lot of sense, right? That's supposed to be the way that open source projects emerge,
right?
And how they get maintained, and I think it's wildly credible too to say, hey, I don't talk about my project to talk about my project. I talk about a problem and how I solved it with something that became a project.
Right. Another thing we noticed as well. This is another just kind of funny aside is my projects seem to unearth more bugs in Microsoft libraries than anyone else I know. So like Mediator has exposed a lot of bugs in the Microsoft DI container because of people just doing stuff that I wasn't quite expecting. Or things that like other containers support out of the box, but like Microsoft didn't need it, so they didn't build it. The same thing happened with AutoMapper. AutoMapper has this like link support. And we have uncovered more bugs in Entity Framework's link provider than anyone else I know, because we're just building these crazy link queries behind the scenes and shoving it over to to make SQL. And they're like, "Oh, what is this you just gave me?" I'm like, "Sorry."
Yeah. So generated link query to become a generated SQL query doesn't always go well. This is classic Chinese whisper stuff, right? Like I whisper in your ear, you whisper in his ear. Is it the same? I don't think it's the same.
But when it works, it's beautiful.
Oh, it's handy. Well, and again, it's like, and you probably made the product better in the process because like this expression should have worked. Why didn't it work? I
mean, I had a pull request open on the Microsoft DI container that was finally merged after, I think, 4.5 years.
Wow.
And that's after going through like, I think the third repository, because they went through like several consolidation efforts. So like this issue had to keep getting recreated, like, and first over here and first one over there. But it was something to do with the variance stuff. They had a bug in how they were doing generic variants, and it broke scenarios for us. And it was a valid scenario to me. So people were doing this thing with the notifications where they would have something like a invoice approved notification. But then they would make that notification implement interfaces like I auditable or I loggable. And so they would look for all the auditable notifications to make sure those got audited.
Right.
But something broke with that. Like it couldn't handle that like kind of level of indirection. So it's stuff like, yeah, I don't know if it's a valid use of container, but it should work, and it doesn't.
Right. And they tried to ditch you more than once by moving the repository. So maybe we can shake Bogard off this way.
The repository shell game here, yeah.
If we move the project, maybe he'll leave us alone.
None of the DI container authors like have many good feelings for me because they keep getting issues open in their repositories to support something that people are doing with my stuff, and they're like,
right.
I noticed that you have an interface for iStream request. So
that's a new one. Yeah.
You're embracing streaming. I said it was simple, but you have these, like every time you think I need to write something to support. Oh, what about this? I look and there it is.
Okay. That was still one though. I actually had a real world project scenario on that one. And I wouldn't have put it in if I didn't actually need it. Cause it was like, with a regular request response, when you get the response, the server is done.
Right.
Like it's done doing the work, and you get this data object that's finished.
Except for IAsync result.
Well, you have to yield it at some point. Yeah. But the stream stuff was like, well, you're getting an stream enumerables. I forget the name of the interface.
IAsync enumerable.
That's the one. Thank you so much. It's like, it's not done yet.
Right.
And even like enumerables aren't quite, done yet, but like it's still connected to the server potentially. But our use case was we were doing, on-demand real-time ETL from a huge on-prem database to like our new microservice database in the cloud. And it was too big and complex to try to ETL the whole database at once. So we said, okay, the first time a user hits this, we're going to stream the data from just their data into our system, so we don't have to do everyone all at once, which would just be too complicated. So we hooked that up to another library of mine. We don't have to talk about it, but it's one called Bulk Writer, which is basically link to SQL bulk copy.
Nice. That's a nice little tool.
It will enumerable a bulk copy operation. So I'm only loading in like n number of records at a time using the SQL bulk copy library that Microsoft has.
Cool.
So the minute I could stream, thousands or tens of thousands of records through link in ETL in milliseconds through this process, as well as like transforming as I go. But at the end, I needed to stream it out through an API to our server. So we thought, Microsoft now has gRPC support, which also has async and enumerable support. So we're able to stream all of that through this mediator pattern all the way out to the consuming client to be able to stuff it into the database instead of having to load tens of thousands of records at a time. It's only async enumerables, the whole async enumerable turtles all the way down. So that's really where that came from. Was all these Microsoft stacks, ASP.NET Core and their gRPC stuff now supports async enumerables. We're not keeping, not loading up all the results in memory. It's streaming it back out to the clients. And so this was just to support those kinds of scenarios.
And also in that list of things that you could support, you have API contracts and gRPC contracts, but you also have Blazor with no sort of any explanation as to how or why you would support Blazor, because that's all UI.
Yeah, it is. So in the cases where you do have this kind of I don't want to stick everything in the Blazor page, I want to shovel it off to something else, then it kind of goes into there. But it is just cross this boundary, because I've had folks another example is Razor pages or Azure functions where it's already kind of contained in a class. So what advantage does it give you? So for me, I don't use this pattern in Azure functions because I'm already at the scope of a function.
Right.
Having another level of indirection won't really do a whole lot for me.
All right. So you meant to say Blazor server there.
Blazor server. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So yeah, you're on the server side. Yes, you have access to the database and you don't have an API layer, but you still have some kind of manager in the back end that's going to do stuff. This is a really good solution for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But when I get to these sort of functional frameworks, I tend not to use this because I'm already there. I'm already one class, one method, good to go.
Yeah. You don't need to add complexity if none is required. No. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, part of this all comes back to conflicts. You're not having conflicts.
Yep.
No.
So why bother?
I mean, the only time I've really run into situations like that is if the function they give me is still way too tied to whatever framework they're in.
Yeah.
Then then I'm just going to take that one extra step of pure data in, pure data out versus all this other cruft that's going around there.
Yeah, but really you should be pushing that problem back to them going, guys, you need to unbind a little here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they yell at you that it doesn't work and they're taking your business elsewhere. And you're like, it's free.
Exactly.
I'll give you your money back if you like.
I'll give you all the money you paid back.
So what's next in your world, man? What's in your inbox?
Oh man, I'm the past year or so, I've been elbow deep in modernization of ASP.NET MVC to Core ASP.NET Core .NET 6.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of cloud migration, and let's also get it off of ASP.NET 4.8 and get it onto ASP.NET 7, 8, whatever. So
And why 6, not 7?
Because I started that project a year ago, before it released.
Legit. Yeah.
that was it.
I got enough to do. I don't need to switch frameworks.
No, so I get to see these projects are using my libraries. So I'm now I have to go through these migration processes because I have to upgrade the code from whatever I thought was a good idea.
You get to take advantage of the new features of C# too. I mean, one of the things when I'm talking to folks that are coming out of 4.8 now and looking at 7 projects, you're 4 versions of C# behind now. There's some good stuff you get by getting away from 4.8.
Yeah. Step 1, take everything out of startup, put it in program and make, what do they call those? The controllers that are right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Move all your controllers into these, anonymous, get.
Yeah, Global ACX, just copy and paste it over there.
Yeah.
Probably got an Owen startup over there.
Change
too,
6.0 to 7.0 and you're done.
It's easy.
It's easy.
It's fine. We're fine.
We're all fine here.
It's one recurring theme on the run as side. We were talking about, hey, you know what's good? Wait another version. Because the migration tools get better, the validators get better, like everything will get easier. If you don't see an immediate need for this feature right now, there's strong incentive to wait a little longer till you really need it, because it will only get easier over time.
Yeah. And so this code base was started with my previous company back in like 2010 or so. Mm-hmm. So it's like all the mistakes of Jimmy past.
You hate your past self. Like, what was that idiot thinking?
Yeah. So that's like, it's all like, in tier sort of stuff, which isn't bad, but like I can see like, oh gosh, they still got the managers and the repositories and all this stuff. And it's hard to test. It's all coupled. And all the things that I realized we had fixed like in subsequent to that project, but it's kind of a snapshot in time of what we thought was.
So it's good to be kind to yourself. It's like, that's what we thought at the time. We have learned since then. Yeah. And now I have to clean that up. Hey, before you go, call back to the comment. Do you get many contributors in the sense of like financial things or anything for AutoMapper or Mediator? Like, does that happen?
Oh, so I do have my GitHub sponsor link on those projects, but the levels are basically tied to different qualities of alcohol you could buy me. Right. So like $100, a pretty decent bottle of whiskey, and then down to down to like craft beerish levels, or just like PBR at the bottom, PBR level. So I have received one significant contribution that is my project, or AutoMapper was recipient of the AWS.NET open source thing last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't really know what the state of where they are now, because they had a big contraction in their team. So they did a few donations, and then I think I don't know if they just saw like .NET's not a big deal for them or whatever. But just the one. But I don't expect that or seek it out either, because
no. I always get the sense with you, Jimmy, whenever we talk to you, it's like you're just busy doing the work for your customers. Yeah. And this other stuff comes out the side of that, and that's nice, but it's not your focus. Yeah,
I just coming from a product background as well, I knew like I have to design for the people that are actually using it, that I could talk to and get feedback from. Mm-hmm. If I just design something, especially open source libraries, like you put it out there, but how do you get that feedback from people using it? And so I can't sign an NDA with everyone that comes up and says, I have this problem. Okay, well, let's really dig in to see what's going on there. Right. I don't know. I don't want to do the support thing either. Mm-hmm. So I just design for what's in front of me, the people that are paying me to do work for them. And then I know that whatever I'm building will work for them, because that's what they're paying me to do. And if I just put it out there and other people can use it and they get value from it, that's just kind of icing on the cake. But the primary focus for me is the people that actually, pay to have this work done.
That are paying you. I mean, that being said, you have had a few contributors to Mediator over the years. I don't know that they're substantial.
Oh yeah. Code wise, of course. No. Yeah. Code is a different thing, because it's time. Right. And that's more difficult.
And usually I imagine they're solving their problem too by giving you a pull request.
Yeah, it does still take time for me to understand what problem they're trying to solve, and is this the problem that should be solved in my library, or is it an actual issue, whatever. Because half the time the issues are raised, I'm like, it's not me, it's the container. Go figure it out over there. Yeah. There's nothing I did.
I'm not going to fix your broken container for you with this software. That's not how that works.
Yeah, it's just go and then make them mad over there. That's fine.
Share the anger.
Yep. Well, Jimmy, thanks for sharing this with us. Mediator looks very cool, and I can think of at least 2 customers that are going to take a look at it right now. So thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be on.
All right. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.